Welcome everyone. My name's Samuel Legge. I'm a product manager here at Google. In my past career, I've worked in many startups and on many startups. So today I wanted to talk to you all about building a useful roadmap for startups. This is a particular topic of mine that I'm passionate about. It's something that I feel like if you spend a lot of time getting this right, you'll reap a lot of rewards as a team in terms of how you build your product, how quickly you can build your product, and how much product you can release. So a quick TLDR before we jump in here. This is a longer session that I typically present to startup audiences, but for today's lightning talk, we're going to trim it down a bit. So the TLDR for today's session is roadmaps are important, but typical roadmaps are a waste of time for many startups. What I mean by this is the way that most people talk about road mapping is mostly geared towards businesses that are on the scale of Google or at least a medium to large business. So we really want to talk today about what is a lightweight and highly flexible roadmap that is more built and ready for startups. And the main mentality to have here is basically time is a startup's most valuable resource. So we want to build roadmaps to make the best use of it. And there's kind of three main best practices that I typically talk about. For today, we're going to talk about the first one here, which is building a timeline based on task clarity. But just so that you understand, there's other tactics as well, including like shaping work effectively and using a process called betting as part of your sprint planning process. And because I'm not going to cover all of it, I'd suggest that if you're interested in following up more on this type of topic and more on these best practices, there's an online resource called ShapeUp. Just Google ShapeUp. It's typically the first or second item on the list. It's a methodology built up by a team called Basecamp. And it's a very quick and actually enjoyable read about a new methodology mentality related to building great roadmaps. Okay, so let's dive in. So to get started, let's talk a little bit about the mentality that I like to think about when building roadmaps. So number one, each sprint is time you never get back. This seems, obviously quite intuitive, but it's an important mentality to think about as you're building out your product. And when it comes to time, this is basically in a startup, at least, as it is in many places, but in a startup, this is a little bit more critical than others. It's a function of the money that you have available to you as a business and the team and the size of that team and the cost of that team. So essentially the thought process here is if you increase the money that you have available to you, you increase the amount of time you have available to you as a business to work on things. In an opposite fashion, if you increase the size of your team, it typically reduces the amount of time you have available for your business to work on your product. So how this relates is basically time is a startup's most valuable resource. Everything that you do as a business leader, whether you're the co-founder or the CEO or individual contributor working inside the team, is thinking about how can you make best use of the time that your startup has available to it. So how I think about this is one of the best ways to make use of time and the best ways to make sure that you can really manage the time that you have available to you best as possible is thinking about how you can build in flexibility and efficiency into your product dev processes. So making sure that you can change what you're working on easily. And when you are working on something, you're being as efficient as possible as a team and working on it. These two things really add up to a lot of gains across the board when you're working as a small team trying to ship a lot of product. So the question here then is, how can roadmaps help me save time? And there's kind of four main things I think about when I think about, why are roadmaps important at a startup? I know that many people are either in kind of two camps. One is, let's not waste any time on roadmaps. Those are useless. And other ones are like, if we don't build the perfect roadmap, we don't know what we're working on. So, we can't get started. I think there's, obviously a really happy medium between those two. And the way that I think about, what that looks like is number one, roadmaps really help provide transparency to your goals. So whether, again, you're a co-founder or you're a product manager in the team or the de facto product manager that doesn't have the title, this is a really great way to communicate to the whole team what you're working on and why you're working on it. Secondly, it's a really great tool for helping you organize the team around high impact work, making sure that every single sprint or every single cadence of whatever you're working on is always working on the most important thing. Full stop. That's what you want to do as much as possible. Roadmaps are your tool to do that. Number three, really, if you build these roadmaps well and collaboratively across your team, it's a great way to hold each other accountable. And this is more so from like a perspective of not just the teams at the lower level who are working on the product itself, but also the co-founders who are setting the goals and organizing when and what we're working on. Everyone gets to hold each other accountable when you have a clear and understandable roadmap. And number four, it acknowledges risks and uncertainties. I think this is one that a lot of people miss, but inside of a startup, when you don't know exactly who your customer is and you're still trying to figure out what market you're trying to enter, making sure that you are really upfront and honest about where your risks and uncertainties lie is a really great way to build trust and rapport with the team that you're working with. This is something that you constantly need to be building as you continue to grow out your team. So with those things in mind about like why roadmaps are important and the critical mentality around time being the most useful or the important thing for startups, let's talk a little bit about what a roadmap could look like for a startup. So number one, the goal here is, we want to build a lightweight roadmap that is focused on using your team's time as efficiently as possible. And so what that looks like from a requirement perspective is it's easy to understand. So anyone can look at this roadmap and very quickly understand what are the things that I'm likely going to be working on next. What are the things that are just after that? What do those things roughly entail? How big are they? Number two, it's really honest about accuracy or the lack thereof. This is something that I'm a really big proponent of, essentially making sure that there's no veil of secrecy around how accurate or how clear you are about what this task should or should not be. The more honest you can be about that accuracy, the better with your team. And number three, these roadmaps allow you to constantly reorganize around high impact work. And this is really getting into the flexibility aspect of road mapping and building. If you build a roadmap in the right way, you should be able to go in on the Monday morning and basically reorganize everything that the team is working on in half an hour. And everyone, should be communicated pretty easily. Again, going to point A, they should be able to look at it, understand, hey, this is what's been reorganized and this is why. And this is all about just trying to make the best use of your time as a leader and the best use of your team's time so that they can build the best product they can build. So with that, I'm going to get into one of the best practices that'll kind of get you towards this North Star of a roadmap. But before I get into that, just one more shout out. The rest of these best practices and more are really built out of this online resource called ShapeUp. Again, Google it, easy to find, really easy to read through as well, free. So there's no real barrier for you to just take a couple hours and take a look through here and learn what you can. So best practices, three things that you talk about. We're going to talk about the first one here today. So that's building a timeline based on clarity. So when we're thinking about building road mapping timelines, we're always thinking about development efficiency. And when I think about development efficiency, I think about two main variables or factors that contribute to being as efficient as possible. Number one is the clarity of a task. So this is really, when I create this task and I craft it for the team, how clear is it? And clarity is in the form of, how well do we know the customer? How well do we know what we need to build in order to address the customer's needs? How well do we know the problem? How well do we know the technology that we're going to use in order to deliver the solution? So really like a full picture of how clear this task is. And number two is the scope of the task. So yes, we might have a very clear task that is got a very clear understanding of the customer, the problem, the solution, but it's a really large task or it's a really small task. And these two factors are the biggest contributors to how efficient your team will be in building out product. So clarity of task, this is something that is typically in a larger organization that has dedicated product managers like myself. This is an ideal function of a product manager, is to increase the clarity of a task before it gets to the team that needs to work on it. And so I always ask the teams that I work with, like, who is your de facto product manager for each task that you have in your roadmap? How can they spend more time creating clarity for the team before the team starts working on it? If there is no product manager, it's probably a combination of the co-founders, or maybe there's an engineer on the team who's contributing to the roadmap. Whoever it is, think about how you can stress the importance of creating as clear as ask as possible for the task as that's in the roadmap. The scope of the task, this is just a general rule, and I'm sure many people here are aware of this, but it's something that throughout my career has time and time again proven to be true. Essentially, the bigger the task, the larger the risk of not shipping. Many times we've always said it's going to be different this time. Even though this task is a big task, we think it's going to be different for X, Y, and Z, and it's not going to be overly risky in order for us to work on it. Very rarely is that true. And the reason why this is important to kind of remind ourselves is that shipping more means learning more. Therefore, as much as possible, you should really try to roadmap small shippable tasks. I think additionally, I'd add one more thing there, which is reliably shipping. So shipping on the schedule that you set out for yourself is also super important for the morale of your team. It makes people feel successful. It makes people feel like you're gaining momentum. And again, this is all related to how big these tasks are that you hand off to the team. There's a little asterisk there that says, sometimes shipping too much, too fast means you aren't spending time to learn. So I just always like to, remind teams that you can't work on, 5 features in a week, because then you're not spending time learning. So that's obviously a balance here, but typically the balance for most teams is more in the camp of building or scoping too large of tasks versus too small of tasks. Okay, so talking about the timeline as a tool here that we want to discuss. This is a typical timeline view broken up into kind of 3 main time periods. So how this works is from left to right. You read this, left being what you currently are working on, right being the furthest out amount of work that you've roadmapped. For the visualization here, we're kind of just using the size of these blocks to represent the scope of the task. So let's say, let's look at this map a little bit closer. Essentially, how this works and why it's shaped the way it's shaped is basically, you should be able to, as you gain clarity in these tasks, you'll see that the smaller the task is, which is basically the scope of the task, right? The closer it is to the current sprint. And this is just a mental model for you to use when you're thinking about your timeline, is that, the roadmap should roughly reflect this at most times, where smaller tasks are closer to the current sprint, whereas larger unscoped tasks are further out in your timeline. And this is really what I'm talking about when it comes to like the clarity of a task guiding where it sits on the roadmap. When you have a task that is unclear and not fully ready for the team to pick up, it's okay to not work on it right away, right? We can put it a little bit further back in the roadmap and work on creating some more clarity before we bring it to the team. And just a quick note about the timelines here. So we're talking about 4 to 6 weeks, so a month and a half away from the current sprint, 2 to 3 months, so roughly a quarter, and then 6 months out. I think many of us would know this already, but trying to plan more than 6 months out is typically a waste of time, especially in a startup. I would say when you're thinking about road mapping beyond this point, as much as possible, lean on your mission, lean on your vision to help your team understand what's going to be after those 6 months. And so let's just take a run through on how this timeline approach would work in a practical example. So let's say that you have 2 new exciting tasks. Number 1 is a high value usability tweak. So this is something that, maybe you've watched someone use the product and they really are struggling at this specific point in the flow. The second feature is a new feature idea. So this is a brand new feature that you want to add to the product. It's something that you've discovered by either understanding a problem set that the customer has and designing a solution for it. And so the question you ask yourself is, okay, I come in Monday morning and I got these two things that I want to add to the roadmap. How should these fit into the current schedule? So if we take that timeline view that we were just looking at, this is how I would suggest kind of mapping those out by default. Obviously, this is not how you should always map it. This is just a suggestion on how I would approach it based on the information that we have. So that high value usability tweak, it's probably something that is very clearly understood from the get-go because you've understood, hey, I know where the problem is, I've seen it firsthand. And I know that if we change the button or if we move this menu here, we'll solve that problem pretty quickly. So probably pretty easy to slot into this idea of like 95% clarity, which is that 4 to 6 week time frame. The new feature idea, you're coming in on Monday morning, you're super excited about this new feature and you wanted the team to work on it. I'd suggest as a starting point, put it into that 2 to 3 month bucket and really working on figuring out how to create more clarity in order to get it into that next 4 to 6 week bucket. This is something that I've seen personally being a product manager inside of a high growth startup. People that run these businesses, they're super excited about the product that we're working on. Many times the executives on the team have a really great idea coming on Monday morning that they want to see in the product as quickly as possible. Putting that feature right in the immediate next sprint without spending the time to really distill and break down exactly what we want out of that feature really is just leading your team to disaster in some ways because you're basically handing them off an unclear task that is not probably fully scoped and you're going to completely break down their efficiency in delivering product for you. So I'd suggest, generally high level reminder, think about clarity when you're road mapping items. Just because you have something new and exciting doesn't mean it needs to be built tomorrow. Really optimize for efficiency of your team's development, and efficiency is highly impacted by the clarity of the task that you're handing off to the team and the scope of that task. And with that, that's kind of it for my session. Hopefully that was helpful, and I really appreciate you all listening.